Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name's Jemima, I'm recovered from an eating disorder and I found faith through the fight. So today I'm going to be talking about what happens when you are not sick enough. It's kind of ironic because I'm feeling a little bit under the weather today, just physically with a cold, and that's why I'm posting this video today and not yesterday because I was pretty rough over the weekend. I just want to begin by saying that if you're watching this video, then you probably are sick enough to get recovery from an eating disorder. If you think that you have an eating disorder, you probably do have one, because people who don't have an eating disorder don't wonder whether they have an eating disorder. It's likely that you're here to seek validation, so I'm giving it to you. You are valid enough to get help and to get better. Something that an eating disorder does is it always tells us that we are not sick enough. It always tells us that we need to be more sick in order to get better. Now, our eating disorder will compare ourselves to other people and go, oh, well, they're sicker than I am. They're worse off. They're in hospital. I've never been to hospital. That means absolutely nothing. If you are having trouble with food and your relationship with food and it's distressing, you most likely probably have an eating disorder, so definitely go and get it checked out. And it's actually really common for people who are in recovery, if they do end up relapsing, to relapse worse than they were originally. And this is just because they didn't feel like they were valid enough or sick enough in the first place. In fact, realizing that we actually are sick enough to get help can be a massive step towards getting better in recovery. An eating disorder will treat it a little bit like a competition. Who can weigh the least? Well, guess what happens when you win the competition? When you do weigh the least, the lightest person in the world, you would probably die. And I know that sounds really, really harsh, but an eating disorder will stop at nothing to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep taking control. And in the end, if you don't do anything about it, you will die. And I know what you're going to say, my eating disorder would tell me this too, that it wouldn't let me get to that point. It would just let me get thin enough. But that's not true. It will tell you that it's okay, but it's not. It's lying to you. So how do we know if we are sick enough to get help and to recover from an eating disorder? Well, the first thing is that you are trying to prove that you are sick enough. People who aren't sick don't try to prove that they're sick. This could be things like really exaggerating your behaviors and making them become a lot more dangerous just so that people can see, like healthcare professionals can see, that your body weight has plummeted or that you actually reached the right amount of BMI for a diagnosis, for example. You're adapting certain behaviors to make yourself seem worse. If you're doing this, you are sick enough to get help. The second thing is that your family and friends are visibly worried about you. A great thing to do if you're trying to seek validation for your eating disorder is just to ask them. Say, what are your concerns? Are you worried about me? And ask them to be true and honest and just brutally honest. It's highly likely that they are worried about you, and actually they are the best people to tell you whether they think you are sick enough or not, because when we have an eating disorder, our ED makes our perception really, really off. So a great example of this is body dysmorphia. You might look in the mirror and find that you actually think you look bigger than you are, but your eating disorder is again lying to you, and your family and your friends who are on the outside can help you see that. And sometimes your family and friends being brutally honest with you and telling you how worried they are can be enough to kind of shut the ED part of you down and let the real part of you make the decision to start recovering. And another reason is that you are seeking validation of your ED. Well, here it is, I'm giving it to you, okay? If you are looking for validation, here it is. Here it is, I'm giving it to you. You are sick enough, now go and get better. And I just want to note as well that you don't have to be at rock bottom to start getting help for an eating disorder. In fact, even if you don't have an eating disorder and you just have some problems with your eating and it can be a little bit stressful, you don't want that to develop into a fully blown eating disorder, so you want to nip it in the bud early. Also, often getting help and getting assigned a therapist or an eating disorder nurse or specialist to help you doesn't mean that you're going to start improving right away. This is why early intervention is key. Now, unfortunately, most healthcare systems, especially in the UK, don't have the resources to be able to help with all the early intervention stuff. And that's just because there are a lot of people who have pushed themselves so much in order to get help that there are people worse off than you might be. And that doesn't mean that you are invalid or that you don't need help, but it just means they don't necessarily have the resources and the time to give you that help that you need. So what happens if the doctors tell us that we're not sick enough? Well, maybe in the doctor's eyes you aren't sick enough to get better. They might be looking at a diagnosis sheet where you have to tick certain boxes in order to be able to get the treatment that you actually need. One of the things this might be is your BMI. Now, BMI is really a load of rubbish, I just want to say. It doesn't really tell us much about the person, to be quite honest with you. The BMI scale was created in the 1800s by a mathematician and not a doctor. It was normed on a group of white men, which didn't take into account age or ethnicity or gender or body diversity at all. It's actually stopped being used as a metric in many Western countries, and the USA actually have another category for anorexia called the atypical anorexia diagnosis. I mean, anorexia is anorexia, but at least they are taking into account people who are struggling with anorexia, who don't have a BMI below whatever it is, like 17.5 or something. But I'd like to remind you that an eating disorder is a mental illness, just like depression or anxiety, and your BMI is just a side effect of all those things. Therefore, your BMI might be in the healthy weight range, but you still might have a very active eating disorder. Unfortunately, a lot of professional doctors don't get enough training in this, so don't understand that. So what you can do is to educate your doctor. And that might sound really weird, but you can go into your doctor's office and say, these are the symptoms of this eating disorder. I think I have this eating disorder because I tick all of the boxes. There are some absolutely great resources on the Beat website that you can print off and literally take to your doctor to give it to them to educate them about these things. You can also ask for a different doctor's opinion as well. And if none of this works and they still won't refer you and you can't get the help you need, there are some alternatives. You can get a private therapist or counsellor to help you through your eating disorder and to help you recover. I would say that it's a really good idea to try and get someone who does specialise in eating disorders or who has at least dealt with eating disorders before. And if you do have a faith, I'm a Christian, so this really helps me. It's a good idea to try and find a therapist with the same faith as you. I know that there are some Christian values which would really help me if my therapist understood and also agreed with me in, because then it would just make recovery a lot easier and I'd be able to relate to her a lot more. But I would like to say that if you can't afford a private counsellor or therapist, it really doesn't matter. There are so many resources out there to help you. This is exactly why I've created my YouTube channel, because I want to help as many people as possible. Now, I know that I am not a professional by any means, but there are professionals out there. There are professionals on YouTube who do some fantastic videos to help you. To be honest, you probably actually know how to recover anyway. You just need to do the opposite of everything your eating disorder is telling you, which I know is scary, but you can do it. But there are also some really fantastic books out there which use CBT and other types of therapy within them to help you. And I actually had two therapists, but the thing that helped me the most was two books that I'd read. One was an anorexia recovery book and another was a bulimia recovery book, and they helped me the most to get better because I was able to do it at my own pace and really focus on the things that I needed to focus on. I'm going to be doing another video next week which tells you all about those different resources that I found helpful, and hopefully if you guys have more of them as well, you can put them in the comments below on that video, and that will really help each other too. So that's everything I've got on this video. I just want to end by saying that if you are still unsure about getting help, if you are struggling and looking for validation about being sick enough, you are sick enough, go and get help. I know it's scary, but you can do it. You can beat this eating disorder. See you next week.